866.
The global population ticked over the 8 billion mark. It's a notable milestone in and of itself, but there are innumerable data points surrounding this number that make it even more remarkable. First, as a reminder, and it's always good to be reminded, we Homo sapiens have only been on Earth for roughly 300,000 years. Seems longer, doesn't it? Of course, you're a newborn dad.
300,000. That seems pretty long, but yeah.
You have two youngsters. And in the year one of the Gregorian calendar, there were about 230 of us on Earth. We hit the 1 billion mark 1,800 years later, the 2 billion mark 125 years later in 1925, the 3 billion mark 35 years later in 1960, the 4 billion mark in about 1975, and then 5, 6, and 7 billion marks about every 10 to 15 years. This last increase from 7 to 8 billion took 11 years. So during my mother's almost 90 years on Earth, hi, Mom, the global population has grown by roughly 6 billion people, which is staggering. The United Nations projects world population to slow down a bit and top out at 10.4 billion in the 2080s. After that, it'll flatten out, and then anticipated it will decline. The generally accepted magic replacement number for fertility rate is 2.1. So if, obviously if women on average have more than that, you have population that grows, fertility rates are lower, population shrinks. In recent years, fertility rates across the globe have declined. Of the 44 countries in a Mercer CFA, Institutional Global Pension Index. I think it's interesting that this is done by an insurance thing, because these global population rates, actuaries and insurance people are really paying attention. Of the 44 countries in the 2022 survey that they did, only 6 have a fertility rate of 2.1 or higher. And in fact, the United Nations has noted that global population is currently increasing at its slowest rate since 1950. A couple numbers: Australia 1.7 births per woman, Japan 1.3, the US 1.6, South Korea just broke the world record for lowest fertility rate at just 0.8 births per woman. MENA, the Middle East and North Africa region, has plummeting birth rates. In 1980, it was 6.2. In 2020, 2.7. And many countries are expected to have smaller populations in 2050. On the flip side, Africa, one of the fastest growing places on Earth now, by 2100, is it projected to have 38% of global population in Africa, close to 40%. Interestingly, in this terms of the growth going forward, by 2050, almost half of it is coming from just 8 countries, several of them in the region that we cover. In Africa, there's 5 of them: Nigeria, Tanzania, Ethiopia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Egypt. The other 3 are India, Pakistan, and the Philippines. So those 8 countries are pumping out kids. India is about to take over the most populous country on Earth from China. And one more factoid, and then we'll close it up. For every 1,000 babies born today, roughly 5 of them will be born in the Oceania region, Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands. 52 in Europe. Russia leads that grouping with 10, out of the 1,000 babies. 160 in the Americas. The U.S. leads that group with 30. Here we go. 326 in Africa. Nigeria leads that at 57. 511 in Asia, with India at 172. So that means basically going forward, 85% of new births will be in Asia and Africa. And you remember our good friend Afshin Malavi has been on this for a long time. We have to get Afshin back on, because he really looks at these major twins and has talked about them for some time. So anyway, 8 billion people on the planet, on the way to 10 plus billion. If we can avoid nuclear Armageddon, more global pandemics, climate collapse, or a zombie apocalypse, may the odds be in our favor, and good luck, human race.
Yeah, pretty cool. 8 billion people is a lot of people. Richard, this is a really good one because this is very important to every person on the planet. This is not just Saudi focused or US focused. It matters to everybody on the planet. I'm sure you saw this as well. The Washington Post is an interesting thing. It's like a age calculator, and then
It is cool.
yeah, it's really cool.
We should have a
Let's
link.
put a link, yeah, because I did this. We were talking about this, and I yesterday put my stats in. 37-year-old man from the United States of America. There are 2.3 million people like me, so I'm not special at all.
In the U.S.
In the U.S., there are 2.3 million Americans that are male and 37. 59% of the world is younger than 37. So I'm now on the older half of the world. That's pretty depressing. I'm older than half of the people on the planet. 57.9 million 30-year-old men on Earth. So I'm one of 57.9 million people. There are a lot of people on the planet. I mean, it's staggering. It is incredible.
Because my ego is more fragile than yours, I did not do mine. I did do my daughter's. And I think she's very special, but there's only 20-year-old females. There's only 121 million in the world.
That's encouraging and also very depressing at the same time. I think that's how it's supposed to make you feel. Richard, the interesting thing you mentioned is the birth rate in the Middle East. And it's sort of something we've been seeing, you and I, anecdotally over the last few years. Haven't really talked too much about it on the 966, but Saudis are having fewer children. And so that's reflected in the birth rate. There are, according to the World Bank 2020, Saudi women are having 2.24 births per woman. And that's down from 7.3 births per woman in 1977. So, and we've seen that with Saudis sort of my age and a little bit younger and then older having many children, and then newer Saudis that are just now starting to have children are sort of balking at having more than 2 or 3. Just interesting how this is all shaping up. But yeah, I mean, just like you said, and Afshin has been all over this is going to change so much in the world. So it's a very important statistic and very important to be aware of.
Yeah, a fascinating milestone. And it was actually kind of fun looking at it. So it's, as you say, it affects all of us. And it, Saudi Arabia, I mentioned the MENA regions. It's interesting in Saudi Arabia. The MENA region I mentioned is from 1980 went from 6.2 to today 2.7. You see, interesting that Saudi, the numbers you mentioned, obviously that's one aspect of the MENA region. Mm-hmm. Their decline has been even more, as compared to the MENA region. Like you said, 7.7 in 1977 down to 2.4. So, so even within the decline in the MENA region, Saudis has been even more precipitous.
Mm. Yep, very interesting. And that obviously has a huge impact on government policy, housing, a lot of other stuff going on. I mean, it touches everything really, because I mean, it's I mentioned actuaries and insurance, retirement, pensions, food production, urban planning, transportation, workforce. Oh my goodness, it goes on and on. Everything, yeah.
And and we might come back to this actually in one of the yellows today. But this is a fascinating topic. This was fun.
That's a big thing, Richard. You chose a very big thing for your one big thing. It's one of the biggest things.